major question. It will be a big question. If the American presidential election doesn't happen before a general election here, then Labour will legitimately and constantly be asked. And I mean, you could imagine a situation where Labour end up saying, well, we don't comment or interfere in the elections of other countries. I don't think that will happen because I think it'll be so clear that a Labour government would prefer to work with Biden than with Trump. So I would say that would be the trickiest would be an American election before which Trump wins. No, in fact, it might even be an American election after which Trump wins, because you'd be sort of working with Biden up to the point of, and then that could get very, very difficult.
Yeah. Okay.
What about books? Should we talk about books? So this is Gavin Dingwall. Dingwall, the home of Ross County Football Club.
Very good.
You knew that, didn't you?
I did not until this moment, but that's a very good insight. Thank you.
All right. So Gavin says, other than your own, what are your favourite of the many political books that have been published this year? I'm going to start with a book that wasn't published this year, but which is very relevant this year. And that is a book by my old friend Donald McIntyre, who I'm sure you know, journalist, spent a lot of time in the Middle East. And his book is simply called Gaza. And if you really want to know the history of Gaza, then that is a book worth getting. I'm also going to give a shout out to Chris Bryant for his book Code of Conduct. Similar theme, Ian Dunt, How Westminster Works and Why It Doesn't. And I think a book I've mentioned on the podcast before, Russell Jones wrote a book called The Tyranny of Nostalgia, which is a really, really good analysis of why our economy is not as strong as it should be.
Well, so my recommendations on politics more broadly, I did an event yesterday with Mary Beard, who's just written a book called Emperor of Rome. And we had a really...
Rory, before we go on, we had a question a couple of weeks ago, which we didn't get around to, but I was also asked this by somebody called Alice in the swimming pool the other day. Mm-hmm. Very keen listener to the podcast, said she'd love to ask you in particular, how often do you think about the Roman Empire?
It's a weird question, isn't it?
But it's being asked a lot apparently.
I obviously think about it a lot. So,
how many times a day would you think about the Roman Empire?
5 or 6.
Really?
Yeah, I think about the Roman Empire a lot. Yeah. Mary Beard and I had a very detailed discussion about Roman emperors yesterday for an hour and a half on a stage at the Cadogan Hall.
So yesterday you thought about it a lot.
I thought about it a great deal. And people interested in it. So Mary Beard, who people will know, has written a beautiful book, not about specific emperors, but about the nature of power in Rome and the way in which power is play acting, the role of women in Roman politics, because of course women were not emperors, never became emperors. And I think I think she was actually really good on this stage at thinking about some of the echoes between Roman politics and British politics.
Including today?
Including today, yeah.
I suppose bringing Cameron back is sort of, we described it as being Victorian, but you could probably go back even further. Go back
to the Romans, get in. A couple of AI books, if people haven't particularly been picking up on that, from people we've interviewed on Leading, and if you haven't heard, do listen to them. Mustafa Suleiman's Coming Wave and
his book is getting a lot of love in the bookshops, I've noticed.
Reid Hoffman's Impromptu, which he wrote with ChatGPT. Yasha Monk, who I think we've talked about getting on the podcast, and I think we should at some point, has written a really powerful book called The Great Experiment. And Yasha Monk is very interested in two different types of things at the moment. He's very interested in the way that immigration works and multicultural societies are formed, and he challenges the populist far right on that. He's also very interested, though, increasingly on challenging the far left on identity politics. In some ways, we should get him on, but he's trying to stand up for a vision of liberalism, which is neither national identity politics nor other forms of identity politics.
The book I'm most looking forward to next year is I'm not giving up on my attempts to get Angela Merkel onto the podcast.
Oh, very good. That would be a real coup.
And I know that one of her key advisors is a regular listener.
Very good.
So Merkel is not doing interviews at the moment because she's writing her book, her memoirs, which I think will be a great read.
Yeah, let me put in a final plug for a book that I've just finished, which hasn't yet been published, but it's about to come out, and people can pre-order, by Gary Stevenson, called Trading Game. Gary Stevenson, working class guy from London, who became a currency trader in a bank just before 2008, and it is the most chilling, terrifying account of the madness of those banks and their culture. I mean, I sometimes, there I am thinking politics is the most noxious, disgusting, bullying, horrifying game in the world. But when he describes these city traders in full roar, you see something absolutely appalling. I mean, both the way that he was treated by Citibank, the way in which they blew up the economy, the way in which they made money, the way in which their bonuses, and just the culture, the day-to-day culture of those trading floors. So Gary Stevenson, Trading Game.
Now, we should just say that lots of people I know will have got your book and my last book through Coles Books, which is a fantastic bookshop down in Bicester. And any of the books that we mention on the podcast, at any time, you can get 10% off at Coles Books by becoming a Trip Plus member and see all the books we mention every week by signing up to the newsletter.
Let's take a break. This week's episode is sponsored by the New European, and they've got a very festive offer for listeners of The Rest is Politics.
Now, New European, regular sponsor. It's one of the fastest growing news titles in the UK. And I have to say, and I'm biased, I'm the editor at large, they, I think, have been nothing short of brilliant at holding this government to account ever since they launched, literally in the week after the Brexit referendum, when the editor, Matt Kelly, thought we've got to do something about this.
And it's not all politics, is it? As